And so, okay, and so with that in mind, off we go. So who am I? Well, my name, as you know, is Scott Mackenzie. I am the professor of theater at Alma College. I just finished my 6th year here. And before that, I taught at another small Presbyterian college, but this one is in Western Pennsylvania. It's Westminster College, if any of you might know that. I am a graduate of the University of Texas at Dallas, and then Michigan State. I actually usually have a little sign up that says Spartan Boulevard on my bulletin board back there, but I take it down when I'm doing presentations for the college because they don't want me advertising the competition. And then that's where I earned my Master of Fine Arts. And then finally at Wayne State, which is in Detroit, I earned my PhD in the Director Scholar Program. So this is my roots. I learned that my grandparents, I just learned the town yesterday, actually, from a town called Glospie, way up north, north of Inverness. It's actually in Clan Sutherland territory, but that's where my grandparents emigrated to Canada. That's where they came from. And then this is just a picture for those of you, some of you that might have Mackenzie roots, recognize Castleloud in Strathpeffer. And of course, the Mackenzie tartan that many of you should be familiar with from attending Highland festivals and our Scottish history. So this is the Heritage Center on our campus. It is actually the Oscar E. Remick Heritage Center for the Performing Arts. Oscar Remick was a former president of Alma College. And I think, to me, it's really interesting because Oscar Remick went from Alma College. When he left Alma College, he became the president of Westminster College, where I taught for 15 years. So I've sort of had this Presbyterian Scottish connection going in my educational career for about 20 years. What I do here is I teach all the acting, and I teach the directing classes, and I teach voice and diction. I also cover the theater history and sometimes pick up a public speaking class when the communication department needs that. But I have been acting and directing for, well, since I was a wee child, acting for, around 50, 60 years, not 60, I'm not that old, but about 55 years. When I started with the Flint Youth Theater, which is in my hometown of Flint, Michigan. Now you might see the Flint Repertory Theater, but it started out as Flint Youth Theater. And the main thing I do in my producing side, besides when I'm directing for the colleges, is I work a lot in adaptation and what's called devised theater. Devising is sometimes called collaborative creation. And it's where you take a topic that maybe you didn't know anything about and start doing some research, you and your friends, and then you start doing some free writing and you start doing some improvisation until eventually you come up with a play. Adaptation, on the other hand, is where you take something, maybe a book or a movie, a film or whatever, you bring it to the stage. And so those are two areas that I tend to work in a lot, of devising and adaptation. My first devising or adaptation experience actually was at my former college. It was called Out of the Fire, Holocaust Survivors Speak. It started because the Hoyt Institute of Arts, which was a museum in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, was doing a installation about Oscar Schindler. And they asked if we could do a staged reading. And I think staged readings are a bit boring. So I got hold of two of my students who were working on their capstones. And these are the two young women here, Colleen and Allison, and said, what do you think? Should we try to create a play for them? And we did a lot of research through another Chicago connection at the University of Illinois. I'm sorry, not the University of Illinois, the Illinois Institute of Technology. There was a man, Dr. David Boder, who after World War II, in the immediate aftermath of World War II, went to Europe and visited the displaced persons camp with an old style wire recorder. This is in the early days of recording. And he recorded interviews within the last, again, these people have been out of the camps for maybe a year or two at the most. And he did interviews with them. And we took those interviews that are all online at the Institute of Technology, and we edited them, put them together, and created a play that we then called Out of the Fire, Holocaust Survivors Speak. And then we produced it. I almost got it done that summer, but I got a call from the Army Reserve, where I was serving with the Army Reserve in Pennsylvania, and found out that I had 5 days to report. And after that, I spent about a year in the Green Zone in Iraq. And I mentioned that also because we'll talk about another show in a minute about it in Iraq. But Out of the Fire, Holocaust Survivors Speak was a play that we produced in Pennsylvania. And then we produced it again after I'd been back, but not at the college. And then when COVID hit, I needed a play that could be done with not many actors on stage at a given moment, and where they didn't have to do a lot of scene work together. And so I actually produced it again here at Alma College. Then another show that it was important to me, again, with this adaptation and devising. And this one is a purely devised piece, but it was based on a book by my colleague, Dr. Jim Perkins, who was a professor of English at Westminster. And it told the story of his boyhood growing up in Covington, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati. And Jim was a creative writer, but I asked him, I said, are these stories true? And he said, there's one thing in each story that's true. They all come from something that's true. And it was, my wife actually was in Jim's class, and part of the class was to read his book. Nice way to boost your sales, Jim. But anyway, she brought the book home and I read it. And I thought, boy, this would be a great thing to create a play about. I was talking to Jim about it. And I said, hey, Jim, you should write a play about this. This would be really great for a play. And he said, go ahead. And so I got together with a group of students as part of a sabbatical project. I wanted to look at devising plays, and I wanted to look at adapting plays. And so we devised Snakes, Butterbeans, The Discovery of Electricity, which is the title of Jim's book. Each one is a different short story. And we created this play. This is Jim right here. You see the straw hat. And now each of my actors is wearing this straw hat. When they're wearing a straw hat that matched Jim's, they were Jim as an adult telling the story of the past. But if they were wearing, say, the baseball cap, that was Jim as a child. So you see this actor here is Jim as a child here telling his stories about growing up. And so that was the piece that we did there. And it was a lot of improvisation. The students wrote parts of it, and they created the play, and it was pretty successful. Then the other half of that sabbatical that I like that I did was to adaptation. And a few years earlier, I had directed a production of Pride and Prejudice, and I had lots of fun doing it. I'm an infantry officer, but I really enjoy Jane Austen. And so after I did Pride and Prejudice, I wanted to do another Jane Austen, but I didn't want to just direct another one. So as the other part of my sabbatical project, I decided to do an adaptation of Northanger Abbey. And again, if you look here, you can see that if you look closely, you see there's actually two different productions. This production was actually at Westminster College, and I didn't direct it. I wanted to write a play and then have somebody else direct it and see what they do with it. And then after that production at Westminster, when I came to Alma and was looking for a play to do, a classical costume piece, I had rewritten some of it based on what we did at Westminster, and we recreated the play again at Alma College. And then the last piece that I want to talk about, this isn't about my devising or adaptation, but it is an interesting piece that I have also produced twice. And when I was in Iraq, I was fortunate enough to be in the international zone, or the green zone, Baghdad, a little corner of Baghdad. So I was not in any serious danger most of the time I was there. I mostly worked on a computer, but I decided that I wanted to still keep that theater thing going for me. And this is my national emergency go-to play, I guess. I did this play because it's all monologues. And so I didn't have to worry if an actor had to go out on a mission on a given day. And so this production, this is the Baghdad production, and this is the Baghdad production. But if they had to be out of the IZ, I could still rehearse with one actor at a time, or in the production, if an actor couldn't be there, we could just not do that monologue that night. Turned out the performances, all the actors were able to be there every night. And so that worked out well. We did it in one little corner. This is one of Saddam's former palaces. And while I was in Iraq, it was also the Baghdad embassy, and it had a giant ballroom. And in one little corner of the ballroom, we set up a theater and produced Bigfoot there. And then I joke about this being my national emergency go-to play, because when I was back at Alma just 2 years ago, and our theater program was mostly shut down, and we could only do shows with monologues or not much contact amongst the actors, we went and pulled out Bigfoot again. And it was fun to do, because in Baghdad, we really did it with just a minimal, turn the lights on, turn the lights off, and that's about it. And couldn't do much else. And at Westminster, I have a wonderful, here at Alma, I have a wonderful designer named Terry Jakimiak. And Terry designed it with lots of projections. And so we did the show. All of these white posts would have different projections on them at different times, depending on what the story was that we were telling. Here you can best see the projections here. Okay, so that's what I started. That led me toward a production that I'm going to talk about toward the end of the talk that we did at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2019. Okay, but let me talk to you a little bit more about Alma at Alma College. And Alma was founded in 1886. As you can see, this was the quote from the synod notes of the Michigan Synod, Presbyterian Synod. And it's, we will, with God's help, establish and endow a college within our bounds. Those bounds, within the bounds, turned out to be here in Alma. There was a gentleman named Ammi Wright, who was a big part of the growth of Alma. He was a lumber baron. He was an entrepreneur. Beautiful giant house here that is now a bed and breakfast that he built for his daughter. His house, the Wright House, unfortunately, is in desperate need of renovation, but funds haven't quite been raised enough yet to do that. But that is one of the projects people are working here toward in Alma. But it was founded in 1886, and initially they built the space because the Eastern Michigan Normal School in Fenton, Michigan, which is south between Detroit and Flint, was looking for a new home. But then, and that was in 1886, but then toward the end of 1886, the Synod said they want to develop a college, and Ammi Wright said, I got the space for you. I've got buildings, and I'll even give you another 25 grand to develop the college. And so in 1886, the college was established, and then the first class entered in the fall of 1887. We're accredited by the Higher Learning Commission here, and we have about 1,400 students depending on a given year. Jeff Abernathy is our president. We have 45 undergraduate programs, and we're just developing graduate programs. Currently, we have 2. One is a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing that's been running it's in its second year now. So we'll be graduating our first class of MFA candidates next year. And then they have just opened up an information technology master's program. And that'll be bringing in its first group of students next year. So where is Alma? We like to joke about being in the middle of the mitten. And so where the star is, that's pretty much where we are. And we have a big Scottish connection in this town. And mostly the Scottish connection, the idea that Alma is Scotland, USA, is what we like to put on our signs, comes because of the college. The college's Presbyterian roots. And then the college developing the Highland Festival with the town, but the idea initially came from the college. And so we like to say we're Scotland, USA here in Alma. So we have a lot of Scottish businesses. Highland Blush is one of our coffee shops. And we again, produce the Highland Festival each year. The college, again, being around from 1885, there's a wonderful book. It's called A History of Alma College, Where Pride and Plaid Prevail. If you can see that in my little picture there, I'll show it to you later as well. And that was where I got most of my information for this, and some of these pictures are from this. We had in the late 1800s, don't know exactly when, there was a bike trip to the Lake Geneva, Wisconsin YMCA conference. Biking is a big part of our history as well, and our heritage. We actually have The Rails to Trails program in the United States. One of the trails runs right through Alma. It's a 44-mile trail that people bike, walk. It's a wonderful thing that we have. And our president is a huge bike fan. He's always seen biking around campus, and he participates in lots of bike rallies. Then this is the Hood building, which is our oldest building on campus. And there was, during World War I, all the men in the college were in, or not all, but many of the men in the colleges were enlisted in the United States Army, and it helped them pay for college, with the thought being that they would later become Army officers. So it was paid for by the Army. And there they are in front of the Hood building. And just as I was walking the other day on Thursday, I thought I will take a quick picture of the Hood building now. You can see a lot of things have grown up around the Hood building. This is our Dunning Memorial Chapel, which is one of the centerpieces of the campus. But this is the Hood building here in 2022. I included this picture of Frank Knox. I think he's probably the most interesting man that's graduated from the college. Some of you that know a little history will recognize the name. He was the Secretary of the Navy during World War II. But what I didn't know is that he rode with Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, and he was a vice presidential candidate in the 1936 election. There's a story about when he joined the Rough Riders. He drove 60 miles to sign up. They needed more men, so he rode his bike, turned around, rode his bike back 60 miles, got some of his friends, and they all biked and joined the Rough Riders. Our college is, we have really strong business programs. We have a good IPA, integrative physiology and health programs. In biology, we actually have one of the few human anatomy or cadaver labs at a small college in the country. There's a few others that have them, but we have the human anatomy lab. So our IPH program is really strong. And then, of course, I think we have a great theater program. Picture here is from our production of The Addams Family just this fall. And we have our cheer and stunt team has won the national championship 3 times the last 3 years, or the last 3 times it's been held. And for those of you that are interested in political science, this should apply to you, Calvin. We have the top model United Nations program in the country. We have won more awards for outstanding delegation and outstanding delegates than any other college in the last 50 years. That's Dr. Sandy Hulme that runs that. Okay. Some of our notable alumni. Okay, we are back to Frank Knox, again, vice presidential candidate. He did some good things. He was a Republican, but he worked in the Roosevelt administration. He was very much on board with being prepared for war, as Roosevelt was. He was against isolationism, but sadly, he was also one of the strongest proponents of the internment of Japanese Americans. So that's a bit of a blight on his record. Some of you may recognize Bob Devaney, who was the Nebraska head football coach in the 70s and 80s, and their athletic director for many years after that. He was an Alma student. George Allen, who coached the Washington team in the 70s, was also an Alma alumni. Jim Northrup of the Detroit Tigers. Betty Mahmoudi, if you know the book Not Without My Daughter, where her husband took Betty and her daughter to Iran on a 2-week vacation, and then he said, "We're not going home," and she had to escape Iran with her daughter. And then finally, more recently, Senator Gary Peters, Michigan senator, is an Alma graduate. A little bit of our Scottish heritage. We always have had the Scottish heritage, but maybe not quite so blatantly. We started out as a Presbyterian college. We were the official Presbyterian college of the state of Michigan for many, many years. We had a strong connection to the Presbyterian Church. The synod would appoint the trustees but then in the 1930s, I think it was, eventually the connection, the being a church college started to separate, and we became a church affiliated college. The support from the Presbyterian Church lessened, and as we started fundraising from other sources, But the point is not always, it wasn't always that we should be a Presbyterian college. It was always a liberal arts college. It was always a college that welcomed people of all faiths. At different times we've had a third of our students were Catholic students. So it wasn't about Presbyterian, you had to be Presbyterian to be here, but it was a church-related college. Now we're affiliated and we have students of all faiths that are parts of the college. Although the way we became the Scots was initially our sports team were the Fighting Presbyterians, which is a little tough to cheer. And so in the 1930s, they started a contest on campus with a big $5 prize that whoever came up with the best name would win that $5 prize. And that prize went to the name, the Alma College Scots. And we've been the Scots since 1934. And in that time, we've really embraced the Scottish heritage. We have pipers. These are the 1950s, even before that we had. We have our Highland dancers, our Highland arts that we have. If any of you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews who are interested in their Scottish heritage, or who maybe play bagpipes or interested in Highland dance, we do have scholarships for Highland arts. So you might want to share that with your families if they have an interest in Highland arts. We have scholarships for piping, for Highland dance. We have music scholarships for drumming. And of course, I do theater scholarships for students, although that's a little less on the Highland side. Our coach, Jason Couch, I always like this. Every time he coaches a home game, he does it in a kilt. He is a graduate of Alma College, and now he is our head coach. We also have the Alma College Pipe Band. The pipe band, they've had pipers as part of the Kilty Band, which is that's the name of our marching band, is the Kilty Band. We've had pipers as part of the Kilty Band since the 1930s, but in 2011, they established the Alma College Pipe Band. They've won the U.S. Pipe Championship 4 times in their division. This is a picture of them just this May over in Scotland at the British Championships. They've won the U.S. Pipe Band a few times. They didn't do so well against all the Scots that were competing, but they did participate in the British Championships this year. And here, just recently at the most recent Highland Festival, they placed first in their division, and that's them receiving the trophy. This is the wee Highland Scots Queen. We have a Highland Scots Queen, and then we have the wee Queen. Our Kilty dancers started out in the 1950s. Back in 1953, they started out as the Kilty Lasses, and they really didn't do anything terribly Scottish or terribly Highland for many years. They just danced at halftime, and they did know the Highland Flings. They did the Highland Fling now and again. But in the 1980s, they started transitioning to become much more Highland oriented. And so now we have a Highland dance program here at the college, and they offer classes. Most of our Kilty dancers, or many of our Kilty dancers, have danced all around the world. The various, I know when I saw the Edinburgh Tattoo a few years ago, there were Alma College students amongst the Kilty, again, amongst the Highland dancers down there. So they often compete. They win national awards. Our Highland dance teacher has been the national award winner as well. Okay. And then the festival, we've already talked about this a bit during the chat time, but the Alma Highland Festival takes place every year, except for the last 2, on the weekend, on the Memorial Day weekend. And it's a big event, brings lots of folks to town, and almost doubles the size of the town for that week. It has been shrinking a little bit over the years, that there have been more festivals growing, but you guys should come on over. It's not that far a drive from Chicago next year. It started in 1968, and again, it was the college really that was the driving force behind developing the festival for the town. Back in 1968, a Alma grad named David Mackenzie, who was a piper, along with our director of development, went to the town and said, hey, we could have this great opportunity to bring folks into Alma. Let's have this Highland Festival. And in 1968, it started. And here we are 50 years later on Memorial Day weekend. And for the Highland Festival, it's all the traditional stuff you expect at a Highland Festival: Highland dance competitions, pipe cans competitions, masked bands, all the Highland arts. Usually there's a display of the Highland athletics, usually a display of working dogs, all kinds of things that are these young ladies were last year's court for our Highland queen, our festival queen. I wanted that picture because this young lady right here and this young lady right here are two of my theater students who were involved as well. So that's a quick bit of about the college, a little bit about me and my theater development, our program, and then I want to talk a little bit about a production that we did at the Edinburgh Fringe back in, we did the production in 2019. So I say Alma College Theater at the Edinburgh Fringe. That's a little bit of a misnomer because Alma College Theater, the festival at the Edinburgh Fringe was me in 2018. It was a chance for me to go over and check out how the whole festival, how the Fringe works, and to get a sense of whether I wanted to bring my students. It took me about 5 minutes of being there to go, yes, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure my students can come and have this experience. For those who haven't been to the Fringe, this is the Royal Mile. This is where everybody congregates to pitch their shows, to do the shopping, just to talk. There are performances on the Royal Mile. This gentleman right here doing a loose wire act. It was really interesting to see. Students here pitching their show. All the advertisements go around. Then as part of the festival, as part of the trip over there, we managed to get out to Stirling Castle, for those that may have been there. And then the tattoo, the tattoo happens each night. And the night I went, it was a beautiful night to get a shot of the gorgeous sky over Edinburgh Castle. Then in 2019, we decided to take a play to create, because it goes back to that devising thing that I talked about, is we performed a play called 44 Days. Okay, the story of 44 Days was because we decided to do this play because of my roots in Flint, Michigan. Even though I was born in Indiana and grew up in Baltimore, my family is from Michigan, and an opportunity came for my dad to return to Michigan, and we moved back to Flint. When my grandfather emigrated from Canada, emigrated to Canada from Scotland. He then emigrated to Michigan to work for General Motors in the 1930s. And I don't know how many of you know about the United Auto Workers and the labor movement, but it was the sit-down strike of 1936-37 that established the UAW as the bargaining unit for auto workers, and it also pretty much ushered in the golden age of the labor movement, because when General Motors agreed to work with the United Auto Workers, so did Ford eventually, well, first Chrysler, then Ford, and it also brought strength to the United Mine Workers and the steel workers, who had all been trying to get established as well. But it was sort of a catalyst for the golden age of the labor movement. So this is a quick picture of my students on the Royal Mile pitching our show, 44 Days. And then this was them warming up before a performance as they got ready to do the show. It was only 5 students this trip. I'd like to do it again with more students. And this is them performing. You get an opportunity to do a little bit of your play on the Royal Mile to try to encourage people to come and see it. And this is them performing a few of the songs of the labor movement for the folks on the Royal Mile. And it helped. We got a few people to come and see the show. This was our performance venue, which was a little bit off the beaten path, but we still had enough people come and see our shows. And then the final thing that we did before we left, I don't know how many of you have been to Edinburgh, but there's a wonderful little bit much to call it a mountain, called Arthur's Seat. It's a plateau above the city. That's a night you climb up and you get a great look at the city, and that was our final thing. So a little bit more about 44 Days is and why we chose it, and how we developed it. Again, I've been into devising for about 15 years now. At my old school, I taught a class with a friend of mine who she would teach about some sort of world issue, and then I would lead our students in creating a play about it. But it was just a class effort with kids that were interested but weren't really actors, weren't really theater kids, but they wanted to take this class for the history and for the opportunity to create something about it. And we worked on things like human trafficking, issues with poverty in America. We did things on rape as a weapon of war in the Congo. That was a very tough piece to put together. And so I wanted to devise something when I got to Alma, and I knew we have a spring term here. So we only have about 3 weeks to put the play together during the spring term. And because that way I could have my students all day long for 20 days or so. And I grew up in Flint. The family history, whether it's true or not, is we believe that my grandfather was one of the strikers who held the plant because what happened was the workers sat down in the plant to control the machinery, and that way they couldn't bring in scab workers, and they sat in there for 44 days until GM agreed to negotiate with them. Okay, and so we did the play. We did research on the strike in particular. We did research on the labor movement. We did a research on why the strike happened in Flint in particular. And part of it, these two bits right here were actually bits that were projections onto our screen. And we'd flash that up, and the students would step out of character and come down and talk about the history of the American labor movement or why they did the sit-down strike. And then the screen would clear and the students would go back into the play and become the various different characters that they were during the play. So we had all these Michigan natives. I had the family history, the Michigan natives, my students. We wanted to share about our state. Everybody knows about Flint. The first thing think about Flint anymore is, oh, that's the town with the bad water. That's the town with all the poor folks. But actually, Flint has a wonderful, rich history, and this is one part of it. And so we decided to do the play, and we took it to Scotland. The students created it in 3 weeks in May. Then they came back a day or two before we left for Scotland, and we remounted it to make sure we still remembered it all. And then we took it over and did the show. So there's a quick picture of them in performance in Edinburgh at the time. It was another one of those plays where characters changed depending on what piece of clothing they're wearing. So you see all these hats and coats and things on the background hanging on these racks. And the actors here, these were the moments where they stepped forward and talked about what happened with the strike and how the strike. This is actually toward the end of the play where they spoke about how the strike affected them, the people affected them. How do we develop this play? Well, one of the things that we got hold of were a lot of recordings and writings that were done in the 1970s when a lot of the strikers were still alive. Unfortunately, the sound quality of the recordings was not very good. It was on old cassette tapes, not recorded on just your standard consumer quality recorders. But the audio tapes are available, and we were using them, but it turned out that you couldn't quite understand what was being said. So we did a little bit of theatricality to help students, or to help our audience understand what's being said. So I just want to play one of these audio clips that we then provided the text over for so when the audience was hearing these kind of garbly stories, they could still understand what was going on.
General Motors in this town, I guess every authority was absent. I mean, you had no recourse When the strike was finally pulled, there was only about 1 man in 4, or maybe less, that thought General Motors could be beat. General
Oh,
Motors.
stop it. And so that was 44 days. That was the creation of 44 days. It was one of my prouder moments at Alma College that these students were able to put together a nice piece of theater that we then took to show internationally. And then we were also to expose my students to some of the best, most interesting kind of cutting edge theater that's going on at the Edinburgh Fringe. Our normal production schedule is we do 3 shows a year that are faculty directed, and then our students do several student directed productions throughout the year. Our production, if you're looking for, Connie had mentioned maybe a field trip or a visit on Halloween weekend this year, we will, the weekend just before Halloween, we'll be doing The Imaginary Invalid by Moliere. I'll be directing that. And then in February, we're going to do Streetcar Named Desire. I'm excited to find. I've been wanting to do that play for as long as I've read Tennessee Williams, but this is the first opportunity I've had to really. I've got the right group of kids right now, and we'll be doing that. And then we're ending the year out with an interesting play that was developed at the Purple Rose Theater here in Michigan. It's called Leaving Iowa. If you don't know about the Purple Rose, Jeff Daniels, if you know the actor Jeff Daniels, he's a Michigan native, and he is from a town called Chelsea, and he is created about, gosh, I guess it's been running for about 30 years now. A play called The Purple Rose. It's named after a movie who was in The Purple Rose of Cairo. And they develop a lot of good plays there. And we actually have one of the original cast members is going to come in and direct for us. So that will also be in April. So if you're interested in a trip on over to Alma, it is just about 4 hours to the city, and you can come and check out what we do at Alma. And actually, if you come to that April show, you could hear our choir. We have a conflict that weekend, so we are actually doing a Saturday matinee of our production so that the choir can have Saturday evening to do their end of the year production. And speaking of the Alma choir, I want to end on a note from our choir. The Alma choir has been touring every other year. They tour the United States, and on the opposite years they tour Scotland, and they've been doing that. Will Nichols is our choir director. He's been doing that with them since, oh gosh, probably 30 years now since he's been here. And the choir is their signature piece is Loch Lomond, and so I want to end on a note of letting you hear our wonderful choir singing Loch Lomond. And this was recorded in New York, and it was on one of their tours in New York. And there's a lot of, if you look closely at the picture, you see a lot of people mingled in. That's several alumni wanted to come and join the choir.
On the sea, sea,
And that is Alma College in a nutshell, and Alma College Theater. And so happy to take any questions or discussion.
I just want to say, wow, that was a wow. And Scott, I know you brought tears to many of our eyes with your choir rendition. So you may have to give people a chance to catch their.
Yeah, I've heard them do that. I don't know. And if you look on YouTube, there's 5 or 6 variations of them doing it at different places. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I tried to get hold of Will to get one of the recordings that they did with the really fancy equipment, but he didn't. He's off for the summer and he didn't respond. But that's still, even though it's a YouTube recording, it still they sound awful good. It's wonderful to listen to them. My office is just down from the music department, so I get to hear bagpipes on a regular basis and all kinds of music. And then on the opposite side, the music department's down the hall, and then Presbyterian Hall, our big concert hall, is right across the hall. So when the doors open to the stage, I can listen to them in rehearsal, and it's just really nice.
Questions, discussion for Scott, please. Don't be shy.
So I wanted to ask how the American labor movement story was received on an international platform when you were at the Fringe.
We didn't get a lot of feedback from people. Didn't come up to us and say, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that," or anything. And again, we were a bit away from the main action. We were in the basement of a church. For those of you that haven't been to the Edinburgh Fringe, they turn every space they can into a theater, whether it's a store, a bar, a church basement, anything. And so we were in a church, but the review did say that it was well researched. But we didn't get a lot of feedback from people particularly talking about it. But having grown up in Flint, it still breaks my heart that while I was in Pennsylvania, the legislature decided to vote and make it a right to work state after all the work that was done to develop the labor movement here. And again, I grew up in Flint with a grandfather who worked for General Motors and was, I think, part of the strike. That's always the family story. And so it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of feedback about it from Scots or international folks.
I asked
they like to play.
I asked that because Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, it is so international in its sentiment. Everyone has something to say about it. And so then setting an example, showing our story, I just was wondering what kind of.
It saddens me a little bit because the labor movement in America is so strong until all the companies started moving overseas to get the cheap labor, and now we're fighting to unionize Starbucks or Amazon. That fight is going on again. That fight that happened in the 1930s. I would love to see. Maybe they need to sit down in an Amazon warehouse somewhere. I don't know. But the thing that was good about Flint, about that strike, is that almost 90% of General Motors parts and elements were built in Flint before they shipped out to other factories. So when you shut down Flint, you shut down all of General Motors. That's what in the 1930s. General Motors has had their revenge. When I was growing up in Flint, we had 7 or 8 factories, and everybody knew somebody that worked for GM. But now there's, I think, 2 GM factories still in Flint, and they've moved down south, and they've moved to Mexico and every place else to stop, to lower what they're paying workers.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, I have a couple of questions. I'm wondering if you would revisit your comment about your outstanding poli-sci department and the awards they won. I was trying to grasp that and missed it, but it sounds really.
Most of you probably heard of the Model U, and I only knew it as a high school thing when I was growing up. But it is a huge event for a lot of colleges. We actually, at my old job, one of our professors, Mike Alapretti, was hired just to develop teach poli-sci, but to develop the Model UN program there. But Alma had about it's the early 1990s, so 30-year head start on Mike. Sandy Hume, Dr. Sandy Hume, is a professor of political science, and he started developing the model UN program when he arrived here in the early 1990s. And those kids are so dedicated. Every Thursday night in the winter semester, they meet, and it's technically a class, but it works much more than the class time, right? They're there late into the evening, and they're planning being whatever country they're going to be, and they then go to there's two different, I guess it's a regional one that is usually down in Indianapolis or down in Missouri, somewhere in the middle of the United States on a given year. And they often come away with outstanding delegation notices. And then in the late spring, they'll go to New York to the actual UN, and they'll have another conference, a week-long conference there. And Sandy's program has brought in more outstanding delegation awards than any other college during the time that he's been running, that he's been part of the program. So many so, one of the first things that I heard when I came to the college was that we were a question on Jeopardy once. And the question was something, I guess it would be the answer on Jeopardy, because you have to do a form of a question, was something effective. This college, Alma, Michigan, wins more awards for international relations at this whatever program. The answer was Model UN, but Alma College was the clue for the Model UN answer. Yeah, so it is the top one. We have a great poli-sci program, not just Sandy's work too. We have a couple of really, really good poli-sci professors. Actually, Britt Cartwright, who teaches a lot of the statistics type classes and also his research areas in governments, in development of governments in small areas, but he has taken students to Scotland, Edinburgh a few times to study the Scottish government and the Scottish independence question as well.
Others have discussion points or questions?
Scott, will you be watching the Scottish independence vote that's going to be coming back around?
I think it's 2023. Yeah, we'll sure keep an eye on it, especially here. I know Britt, the professor I just talked about, I know he'll be all over it, watching that. And he also happens to be my neighbor across the street, so I'm sure I'll talk to him about it a bit.
I'm just curious. I was fascinated, Scott, by your production of Bigfoot Stole My Wife in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Who was your audience exactly for that?
Well, we did it, I think, 3 times, and we probably had an audience of 50 to 60 each night. Again, we were in the corner of a ballroom. We just put up something to block, because there's a thing called morale, welfare, and recreation, which is part of all the military services, right? Every base has an MWR office, every post, and there was an MWR office in Baghdad. And so I went to them when I first got there, and actually I had 2 different commanding generals while I was there. And I first got there and I said, I'm interested in maybe doing something. I'm a professor of theater back home. And they said, sure, that'd be great. But then I talked to my commanding general about something else, the introduction thing. And I said that, I'm interested in doing this. And he looked at me and he said, stick to your job. And I said, okay, that's not going to happen. But then he rotated out and General Peterson rotated in. And I did not tell General Peterson I was going to do this. And I went back to MWR and said, hey, how about if we try to do this play? And I was trying to think, what play could I do, though? And my sister had actually been I come from a very theatrical family. My sister had actually been in Bigfoot at the Ann Arbor Civic Theater back in the early 80s. And I was talking to my wife on the phone. I was very lucky that, again, I was in the international zone. I actually had a telephone that she could call me on every day. So she would, it would just be a long distance call. This is before everybody had a cell phone. It was a long distance call to New York, but she could call me. And I was telling her I didn't know what to do. And she said, what about Bigfoot? So I called Ron Carlson. The Bigfoot is actually not written as a play. Ron Carlson wrote it as a book and the idea behind the book is, who are these people? What's the real story behind these crazy headlines in the National Enquirer or those sorts of newspapers? And some of them are funny. One story is, I ate my best friend's brain, and it's very short, and it's like we weren't really that good of friends, and the plane crashed. Things were, it was awful, but I didn't eat his whole brain, you know. And so that's kind of the joke at the end, the punchline. But then some of them are very poignant. Like there's one called Madame Zelena Explains It All for You, or Madame Zelena Explains It All. And it's the story of the woman who is the psychic for the paper. And she tells the story how she really is psychic, and it's really kind of ruined her life because she keeps seeing horrible events that are coming up for people, right? And so it's very poignant and sad. There's another one about a woman who she refuses to believe that her best friend has died. They were out drinking, having a good time, and the best friend died, right? And because she's what's the story? The headline is The Time I Died, right? She talks about I died, and I had to die. It turns out because she couldn't face the fact that her best friend actually died in the car accident, right? So some of the stories are very poignant, some are very funny. The fun part is the play opens up with Bigfoot, or the play opens up with a guy talking about how Bigfoot stole his wife. As we hear the story, we realize he's like the worst husband in the world. You know, I'd come home from the track and she'd be wondering where I was, and I was drinking a little bit and all that. So the only answer is Bigfoot must have stolen her, you know. But the punchline at the end is, but Bigfoot says, yeah, I took his wife. And so but anyway, Ron Carlson wrote the play. I wrote the stories, and when I was in Iraq, I wrote to him because it's not a play. I wrote to him and I said, can we do this? And he said, sure you can. And he actually sent me an extra story to use in the play. And then 18 years later, when I needed to do it in Alma, I had to track him down again, and I wrote to Ron. He said, absolutely do it. And so we were able to mount it twice. And Ron actually got to see it. This was during the Zoom. We were doing everything with Zoom. And Ron actually got to see the production on a Zoom presentation. But yeah, it was just, I didn't want to not do any theater for a year while I was in Iraq. And I was fortunately in a place that I could, you know, if I had been somewhere at a real serious forward operating base, that wouldn't have happened. But I was able to do it in Baghdad.
Amazing. That's awesome, really.
Yeah, it was, and then, you know, it didn't hurt my tenure, trying to get tenure when I got back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions, Scott?
Yeah, I have a short comment. I wanted to go back to Edinburgh, and when he spoke about Arthur's Seat. And I remember as a young child and as a young adult climbing Arthur's Seat, and it was always such fun. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the climb, if I recollect correctly, there was a tin cup with a chain on it where you could take a cup of the water, the spring water and it was always such fun. And I just wanted to, it was interesting, although I didn't get to see it. I'm not able to zoom in. I just have the phone. But when he talked about Arthur's Seat, it brought back some great memories. And so did the choir singing Loch Lomond. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Choirs. Will Nichols is such a talented choir director. They do, as far as I know, they don't do the cup thing anymore. At least I never saw it.
I'm sure. I'm sure since COVID.
Yeah, exactly. But this was before COVID, but I think they probably still had the health regulations that this is not the best idea ever. Mm-hmm.
No, it was not, but it was something that they did as many things that have that no longer exist. But it just kind of sat there in my memory bank of a child, experiencing that. And it was fun to do some of those things.
I remember walking up Arthur's Seat with my American students, and we were all kind of surprised at how there was not really any safety, anything. You could kind of go anywhere you wanted, and they'd be so worried about getting sued. There would be a very strict track that you could follow, and there was not there. And there were some places that were a little iffy coming down. So it was. Yeah,
it's fun. It was a lot of fun. But thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
And that was Jeannie Smith. I recognize your voice, Jeannie Bruce Smith.
That's me. Thank you. Thanks, Connie, too. Thank you.
You know, Dawn, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking we need to get some collaboration going with Alma College and Scott. And the program it's obviously so enriching to the community. We need to tap into that. And I'm Gosh, I'd love to come out and see Streetcar Named Desire in February next year. You must have a Marlon Brando style student in among.
Oh, well, that's a little of a sad story. I did. And a student came in as a freshman last year, and Terry, my designer, we worked together for years. We worked together at our old school. I actually convinced him to come here. But we've wanted to do this play for years. And then we finally got a kid this last fall who just really could have carried it off. And unfortunately, he decided he's going to go to Michigan State to be with his girlfriend next year. So we're still going to, and I've had good luck. That's happened to me before. You know, we don't pre-cast shows. You can't do that. It's not fair to students, but you certainly you can pick shows with students in mind and say, oh, we can do it with this one, but then have other students that maybe audition better. You know, the student didn't work out as well. And I still have a couple of options, so we'll be all right. But this would have been a really great opportunity for this young man. So I'm sorry that he decided to go be with his girlfriend, but we'll make it work.
Scott, one of the things that we talk about at Chicago Scots, you can be Scottish by birth, heritage, or inclination, just by being exposed to the values and the sentiments and, you know, sort of cleaving to them yourself. And I'm wondering, Scottish identity at a place like Alma College, how do others embrace Scottish identity? And do you find that they sort of adopt those values, that culture, Scottish identity?
Yeah, it depends on the student. I mean, the faculty and staff, you know, I mean, I've got that because of the Mackenzie. I like to joke about I'm the Alma Scot. But the faculty and staff really mostly, you know, they jump in on it. They really enjoy that. They enjoy the Highland Festival coming here. The students, some students come in and they just want to get every bit of being a Scot they can. Like, you know, Jason Couch, our football coach, he was not, to the best of my knowledge, he's not Scottish, right? But he came here, and now every time he coaches a home game, he wears the kilt, right? Because he bought into that identity. And some of our students do. Some just come to college, get their thing, and leave. You know, they do their thing, and they don't really absorb the whole Alma experience. But then other ones, it's, you know, you come to our board of trustees meetings, and most of those folks are wearing something, whether it's a tie or a scarf or whatever that indicates their Scottishness.
Any other discussion today? I think with July 4th approaching, I think a lot of people have family activities underway today. Douglas?
Yes, if I might just ask one question that I'm afraid is probably a bit tangential, but let me throw it out there if I may, and as a closing minute. Thanks so much for your presentation, Scott, and all of you for the program. This was very wonderful. I was just curious about Alma and its Calvinist Presbyterian identity associated with Scots. Is there anything on campus brewing in terms of Celtic spirituality as a challenge to that? Is that any kind of an issue regarding the religious identity of Scotland and Scottish history? And I know that can get into lots of different things, but I'm wondering if anything is percolating up about that these days at Alma.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Andrew Pomerville, who's our college chaplain, he might have a better sense of that.
Okay.
But I don't know anything bad.
Okay, thanks. I'll maybe follow up.
What's his last name, Scott? Andrew?
Pomerville, Pommerville. Yeah. He's a piper, actually. He's also an Alma grad who's embraced the Scottish identity, and he's learned to play the pipes in the last couple of years. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know anything about that, but he's a great guy. I mean, he's somebody you might want to reach out and talk to.
Very good. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Scott, I just cannot thank you enough for being here with us today and making time. This was such an interesting presentation, and I think is going to open a lot of doors for us. And you'll be hearing from us because I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and field trips and who knows, so maybe performances.
Well, I know Will loves to travel the choir, so maybe he could do a Midwestern trip.
That'll bring the house down.
Yeah.
Well, it's just been very gratifying and really inspirational for me. I'm going to get online and see if I can get that book, The History of Alma College. That looks really interesting. And I imagine June will be interested in that. But, and I want to thank Calvin, our intern. He is super bright. And Calvin, I hope you picked up on some of those poli-sci information. Who knows what you might be able to do with that. But thank you, Calvin, for everything you're doing for us. And thanks to all of you who are on today. I know this is a hectic weekend for everyone, and hope to see you next month on August 6th for our History Forum and our Scottish picnic. Same time, same station.
Thanks.
But Scott, thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you for having me.
Stay safe, everyone.
It's too bad that we couldn't have had the next